with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
If you want a 21st century economy for the province of Ontario, you certainly need internet connectivity to meet the challenge. Tonight, we'll assess what the party's broadband plans include and whether they're up to the task. Then, from our Ontario hubs, some election perspective on long-term care. And from a conversation with NDP leader Andrea Horwath to a spotlight on what each of the parties says they'll do about the housing crisis, we recap our election coverage in the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, May 27th, and that's all tonight on the agenda. Huge areas of Ontario have spotty or even no internet service. That includes places across the north, more remote areas in central and southern parts of the province, and even urban households that simply can't afford top-shelf broadband packages. COVID-19 helped drive home just how bad it is. Will this election press whoever forms the next government to fix this? With us for their insights in North Bay, Ontario, Susan Church. She's Executive Director at the nonprofit technology development organization Blue Sky Economic Growth Corporation. And in Richmond Hill, Ontario, telecommunications policy and research consultant Reza Rajabiun. And it's great to have both of you with us tonight here on TVO. Susan, to you first. What's broadband internet like across Ontario these days?
That's a really difficult question to answer because it's completely different depending on where you live. And I think that's, for me, that's the meat of the matter, in that when we talk about what can we do to improve it, when we hear all of the policies of the various parties, you can't speak with one cup. It's not half full and half empty. It's different everywhere.
Well, we're going from Toronto to North Bay right now and we're on the internet talking right now. This line seems pretty clean. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that's another point that we have to, and I hope to discuss during our conversation today, is that there seems to be all of a sudden, and I've been kicking around this for a very long time. And when we first started, our goal was to try and get to 3 megabits per second down. That was considered blistering fast. And all of the government programs were designed to achieve those goals. So now when we're looking at 50 by 10 megabits per second service, one has to remember that, for example, right now, you and I are talking over at 15 by 2. So that's where I'm at. So I think we also have to put that into the conversation, that when there's discussion about the have-not communities, maybe it's not always targeting 50 by 10, but something somewhat lower.
All right, Reza, I can tell you that obviously ever since COVID hit, we have been doing probably 99.9% of our interviews this way. In other words, not in the studio, but over the internet. And I know you're only in Richmond Hill, which is not that far away from where I am right now. But I can tell you, we've done some interviews in downtown Toronto where the line disintegrates before our very eyes all the time. In downtown Toronto, in hospitals, for example, which you would think would have reasonably good service. How does that happen?
It's older infrastructure. So in a lot of areas, there has been competition and you have upgraded cable and fiber networks in an urban area like Toronto. But in some older neighborhoods, big buildings that copper lines were used a long time ago, or let's say subdivisions where I'm living. So I'm about half a kilometer from Yonge Street, but I was telling your producer that if my internet goes out all the time, so I might have to switch to mobile hotspot. And it's because it's an older subdivision that was built in the 1990s, so the lines are old, and it's too expensive for either for any of the telecom providers to actually deploy the fiber all the way to the home of the users.
Well, maybe you could follow up with this, because I noticed that when I talked to Susan, the line is pretty sharp. The picture's pretty good, the line's pretty sharp. But here I am talking to you, and you're a 20-minute drive north of me, and the picture is, how would I describe it? It's sluggish. Like, it's not as sharp, it's sluggish. How can that be?
Well, it could be many. It could be the connection, but it could also be that I have an older computer and Susan has a nice new computer, or is connected to a wireline connection at home versus I'm using the Wi-Fi. And so there's a lot of technical reasons that could be involved in it. But again, it could be the actual connection too. The one key, going back to the COVID issue, is, and the speed numbers that Susan brought up, is before COVID, slower speeds were generally good for sort of first generation applications like email and web browsing and downloading Netflix. But now it's not necessarily a question of speed, it's also the question of reliability and the sort of stability of the connections. And that can only come from adopting new technologies and sort of replacing the old ones. So what you've had happen since COVID began, you not only have had people wanting more higher speed packages, you've also had lots of acceleration of investment by the telecom providers, particularly in fiber networks in urban areas. And also in rural areas, they're not investing in fiber networks, but they are investing in wireless networks. So and then I guess that's sort of a segue to our discussion today, in the sense that the government of Ontario is making heavy investments in expanding reliable, high-quality fiber networks into rural areas.
Right. Well, we're going to look at what all four major parties have on offer in just a second. But Susan, I want to just follow up with you on this issue of speed. You dropped a bunch of numbers on us in your first answer, and okay, should I confess this in front of everybody watching here? I didn't really get what you were saying, because I don't know what 50 by 10 means and all that other stuff. So can you just explain for us, what does that mean, and what's considered a good speed versus a too slow speed?
And that's such a good question. And after I dropped those numbers, it occurs to me that, that's part of the problem with this subject here. It is a very complex, convoluted subject. And, I think users of the internet, first of all, many have such a difficult understanding what it all means. And I really think we have to start focusing on that, so that customers can begin to understand it better. And so, for example, my colleague on the panel was very correct. When a slower speed, such as 3 gigabits per second, and to put it in layman's terms, that's sort of the speed it travels down the highway or down the tube from its original connection. And when you add to it, like Netflix or Zoom or Skype, things have to go back up the tube as well. And when that happens, that's when all hell breaks loose, your speeds slow down, and what was good 10 years ago is not good anymore. So, our governments, both at the federal and the provincial level, are looking to bring 50 megabits per second down and 10 up to all consumers by 2025. That becomes a very difficult matter the more you get into rural areas, but certainly in older infrastructure as well.
Got it. So parts of Ontario are a 12-lane wide 401 on the information superhighway, and other parts are 1 lane in each direction. That kind of metaphor I get. Let's talk now about what the four parties have on offer, and let me invite you to just to be comfortable for a second here, because this is going to take a minute or a minute and a half for me to get through all this. So Sheldon, let's get going here. The PCs are offering almost $4 billion to get high-speed internet to everyone by the end of 2025. They'd invest more than $109 million in Telesat's low Earth orbit satellite network and invest $71 million in the Eastern Ontario regional network to improve cellular service access. How about the NDP? They're pitching affordable high-speed internet province-wide by or before 2025, same year. They'd target broadband speed of 1 gig symmetrical for download and upload, and ensure small and medium-sized service providers can compete. The Liberals, same year again, affordable broadband to everyone by 2025. They'd use existing public fiber infrastructure to expand small municipal or community-owned networks, and would invest in low Earth orbit satellites. And for the Greens, they would establish high-speed internet across rural Ontario, where, of course, they hope to make a breakthrough in this election. They'd make broadband internet an essential service, regulate the industry as well in order to support smaller local internet providers. Okay, let's start with this. Reza, everybody wants expanded broadband, and these parties are all promising to do it by or before 2025. Is that even possible?
Well, that connects to the $4 billion that you noted that's already was announced in the budget last year. That's not new money. It's a process that the government is running. So there is, given that the recognition and investment that they're making, there is going to be, the big constraint is going to be the construction capacity constraints on building the networks over the next few years. And also, it's not just Canada, lots of other countries are post-COVID recognizing the importance of highly reliable internet and fiber-based networks. So there is capacity problems on the fiber supply and equipment front too. And we just also had the federal government ban Huawei, which is going to drive up the prices on equipment, especially for smaller rural providers.
Do you, just out of curiosity, do you support that decision to ban Huawei, even though they're sort of here and it's going to require some significant retooling by a couple of the telcos?
Well, I'm not a political person, but I'm an economist, so I can tell you the impact that it will have on prices for equipment in certain sectors, because they've been very competitive. So they put downward pressure on equipment pricing. So it is going to drive up the price of improving broadband, both for large and smaller telcos.
Okay. Susan, let me follow up on something that was in one of the platforms there, and that is supporting low Earth orbit satellites. What does all that mean?
Well, again, and part of the trouble with some of the information that as consumers we receive about broadband, it's easy to say, let's all do it by 2025. It's easy to say, we support new technologies. The simple fact of the matter is, until we start bringing it down to a level that consumers really understand what it's all about, it is really hard to have this discussion. With the low Earth satellite, and again, to make it simple, Elon's been Starlink. I think a lot of people are familiar with what he's up to these days. The difficulty is that when a new technology comes out, and in particularly this case, you need a lot of the infrastructure in place. With Starlink, it's not quite there yet. And so now what we're seeing is that it's beginning to slow down in terms of its availability. There's, I think, 2,500 satellites that are available. Now the wait times are into late 2023, and it'll take more satellites being, sent up into the air to make it all happen. So again, it's a new technology. It was absolutely wonderful when it first came out, still is for those who can't get internet any other way. But again, the solutions have to come down to a more basic level. What works best in rural and remote communities may not work well in congested urban areas. And what works in urban areas surely doesn't work in the rural and remote areas, because a different technology is needed at an affordable level to be able to do it. When you have something like the Great Canadian Shield involved, and you can't just lay fiber everywhere through rock. So there's so many aspects of the development and the input, how you actually do provide technology. It's not a simple question.
Sure. Reza, there's one thing here in the NDP plan that says target broadband speed of 1 gig symmetrical for download and upload. I think I need a translation of what that means.
That translation, it means that something that cannot be done with older technology, especially in rural areas. So you need fiber for that, essentially. So it means that you need to deploy fiber. You can target it, but achieving that in very, very remote communities and areas along rural roads might be very expensive. So for very remote users, it will be hard to achieve that 1 gig speed on wireless or low Earth orbit satellites. So
well, how do you actually do that?
Even on the best case scenarios, they won't get there. So that promise is useful in the sense that it recognizes what has happened since COVID is that you have more demand, and you also have accelerated supply in urban areas. So actually these digital divides are widening rather than closing, because the quality is getting better in urban areas, low cost, where there's competition between facilities, between the cable cos and the legacy telcos. So in Ontario, between Bell and Rogers. But that competition is improving service quality and driving down prices. But you're not getting the same thing in other areas where that infrastructure competition is not that strong, especially outside of areas where there is no cable networks.
Right? Susan, maybe you could follow up on that in this regard. You know, once COVID hit, there are a lot of people that moved out of some of the biggest cities in this province to some of the less populated areas of this province. But of course, they still wanted all the comforts of big city living, like powerful internet service and the ability to play movies on Netflix and so on. Can you talk about what impact COVID has had in terms of that movement of people from the big cities to smaller communities?
For sure. That's such an interesting question, because we get so many calls now from real estate agents or from the real estate boards that are working with their clients and wondering if the service is available. And we've really heard some interesting anecdotal incidents where people are saying to them, moving up here from an urban area, that access to the internet is more important to them than access to good water. They can fix their water. They can dig a better well. They can't bring internet to their home. No matter what they do, whether they use expensive mobile broadband like cellular broadband, which can be very expensive, it doesn't, they can't fix that on their own. And we had situations where even in my office, one of my staff has 4 children, and during COVID, he had to drive to the nearest library with his children and try and steal signal from the library, which of course ended up being for free. But in the beginning, it was such a mess because nobody knew where to go to get internet so that they could compete in their jobs that they had to do at home and also work on their schoolwork. So when people do move to more rural communities, and not just all the way up north, I mean, moving to southern Ontario, to eastern Ontario, where they move to a more rural area, find the same situation.
Reza, again, maybe you could follow up on your previous answer and talk to us about there are limitations on what broadband is capable of doing. And I wonder if there are just simply going to be, and you talked about the digital divide widening earlier, which is extremely concerning, are there simply going to be places in this province that are not going to be well served regardless?
No, I think there is enough of a political commitment to expand universal access in Ontario. And as you noted with the platforms, there is consensus around it. And that, I think, that reflects that it has been recognized as an essential service. And going back to the point that you're making about housing and affordability, this is also very important, let's say, in surrounding areas of GTHA. As we see, COVID has resulted in very strong increase in housing prices, both in urban and rural areas. But if you don't have good internet, you can't really sell a house because nobody will want to buy it. So you'll get a big discount. And there is development of systematic evidence on the impact of broadband on housing prices too. And I'll give a shout out to my colleague, Helen Hambley from University of Guelph, who's been doing a lot of work on this. And she has some studies that you see if you have wireless internet at home, home can only be connected via wireless broadband. There's a large discount on the price, controlling for the size of the house and the area where it is. Whereas if you have fiber or cable, there is a very large price premium that you can get for the house, so around 7-8%.
Isn't that interesting? So it's no longer nice
exactly
kitchens.
On their areas, and this is very important for municipalities because the value of the houses sustains them in terms of taxes. So in terms of long-term fiscal sustainability of the municipalities and tax base, it is important to improve that connectivity. And that's why I'm being somewhat positive that there is now recognition that these gaps are going to be closed.
That's very interesting. I guess the days of just nice bedrooms, bathrooms, and kitchens is not enough to sell a house now. You got to have good connectivity as well. And Susan, that makes me want to ask you, you're in North Bay. I imagine there's good service in Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie. I mean, these are large Northern Ontario cities. Yeah. What if you get into much more remote areas of Northern Ontario? Do you think people are just going to have to suffer with an increasing digital divide for the long-term future?
And again, that's I'm so glad you brought that up, because just to my fellow panelists, the concern is in those more rural areas of Northern Ontario, for example, wireless, which is, tower to tower, line of sight kind of connectivity, is the only solution that will be there. And we refer to it in cases as last mile. So large telcos can lay fiber, and then that last mile is where a small telecommunication company will come and take the signal from one spot, a POP as they call it, and then move it down a road to those rural areas. If there is no recognition of the massive role that small internet service providers are playing in this whole subject, then we are never going to achieve a balance between bringing that rural divide closer to the in spots, because I can tell you there are so many areas in Northern Ontario that will never see fiber. It just isn't, from an economic point of view. I've seen some of the projects that have been approved under the Universal Broadband and the ICON program, which is the most recent round of announcements, and it's $25,000 to $30,000 per household. And there are people who at $500 a household receive a wireless signal that, with the new equipment that is now available, would work equally as well. So I'm imploring all parties to look at the absolute importance for the small internet service provider. They're the ones that brought us this far, and they have to be the ones that are continue engaged in the conversation moving forward.
Reza, are you concerned that there is not adequate attention being paid to these smaller players, and therefore they may not be able to play the part in solving this that perhaps they could?
It's not a question of political attention. I think what has another impact of COVID has been that you've had a lot of consolidations of the smaller providers. They just couldn't keep up with the reinvestment that's needed. So we've had this in Ontario in a lot of smaller rural wireless providers, also out in Alberta. They've sold themselves. They've been bought by larger providers. So there is that market pressure. It is telecommunication network, so it is really hard to sustain yourself as a small provider. So there's a lot of economies of scale, and there's variation around Ontario. For example, in Western Ontario, there's still a lot of smaller providers than in Northern Ontario. In other places, there's been a lot more consolidation. So it is, what can you do to support smaller provider is to have open and sort of, when you have procurement and subsidizing something, have open processes to give them the opportunity to participate. But you can't really discriminate between smaller and larger providers in procurement processes, right?
All right, so Susan, we got a minute left here. Let's say you find yourself in a situation with whoever becomes the next Premier of Ontario after June the 2nd. You buttonhole them at a conference and you say, okay, here's what you've got to do. Here's job one when it comes to service on this issue for across Ontario. What bug are you going to put in that person's ear?
I think that, and again, yesterday's announcement from the federal government to CRTC in terms of a new policy direction for, a number of items that will make things hopefully more even in the playing field will come into play. I guess my words of wisdom would be that we have got to just take this all down a notch. We don't know yet what's happening with the Accelerated High Internet program, which is about to be announced at the conclusion of the election, I would assume. Once we know that, that's when we're going to learn what small communities are still left over. Let's pay attention to them. let's find the best possible way to use the dollars that will be left in both the UBF and the provincial programs. And let's pay attention to creative solutions. They may not be solutions that one would normally think of using. We have to get creative with new technologies. We have to be able to remember that the farmer that lives down that road, in order for him to compete globally, he has to connect. So we have to pay attention to the rural communities.
Sounds like quite reasonable advice. Susan Church and Reza Rajabiun, we want to thank both of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For many people in long-term care and their families, COVID-19 was a living nightmare. Charnel Anderson covers the Northwest for Ontario Hubs, and she spoke to one woman about what her family went through and what they hope will come out of this election. Charnel Anderson joins us now from Thunder Bay on that. Welcome.
Hi, Dan.
All right, so TVO.org has a series called What's in It for Me, and it's been looking at what's at stake for Ontarians for this election. You spoke to a daughter whose mother stayed in a long-term care home till the end of her life. What's her story?
Yeah, so I spoke to a woman named Maureen, and her mom, Elsie. She was actually a Wren with the Women's Royal Naval Service. She had worked on ships during World War II, Elsie, the mom. And in her later years, Elsie developed dementia, and within about a year, it got really bad, and her family was no longer able to manage her care at home. So in December 2018, Elsie entered a long-term care home in Southern Ontario, where sadly she passed away last year. And like many people's experience with the long-term care system, Elsie's was not a positive one. According to her daughter, Maureen, like, for example, when they were doing intake, no one had asked about Elsie's preferences, what she likes, what she doesn't like, the kind of things that make you, you. And so that was kind of a red flag for Maureen. Maureen also told me that the care that her mom received in this long-term care home was a, quote, crapshoot. She said that some of the PSWs were great. Sometimes when she would go visit her mom, she was freshly bathed, someone had curled her hair. And then other times, her mom had soiled herself and she wasn't cleaned up and she had a UTI. And Maureen feels that a lot of the issues came down to the fact that this place was a for-profit long-term care homes. And, so she feels like the profits were priority over even the care for the residents.
As you know, we're less than a week before the election, and I'm curious, what changes does Maureen hope to see in long-term care homes?
So Maureen, like many critics of for-profit long-term care homes, wants to see the profits gone from long-term care. Nobody should be profiting off long-term care, she told me. As well, Maureen would like to see senior care included in the Canada Health Act, and she would like long-term care to abide by national standards. And so there are national standards in the works for long-term care, but it's ultimately up to the provinces whether they adhere to such standards. And then the other thing Maureen wants to see is more investments in dementia care. You may be familiar with the butterfly method of dementia care. It's been covered on the agenda once or twice. There's a long-term care home in Peel that has integrated the butterfly method. And it's been described as, a person-centered approach that focuses on meeting both the physical and emotional needs of residents with dementia. So you know how long-term care homes look like, some long-term care homes look like hospitals, basically. They're just kind of clinical. While butterfly method homes are meant to be more like homes. They're more colorful. There's books and stuffed animals, the kinds of things that you would find in a home. And the staff, instead of wearing regular clothes, they wear regular clothes instead of wearing their scrubs. And, they receive training on how to connect emotionally with residents living with dementia, depending on what stage they're at. So Maureen says that if, we can't get the profits out of long-term care, then she would at least like to see a mandate where some of the profits go back into meaningful care for residents, including programs like the butterfly method.
I think it's important to mention, you talk about for-profit and nonprofit long-term care homes. Obviously, during the pandemic, a lot of eyes were on long-term care homes in Ontario, where over 4,000 people had died. A lot of those in for-profit long-term care homes. But can you sort of help us differentiate the two? What is the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit long-term care home?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways that the operation of the way long-term care homes are operated can be defined. Perhaps the most familiar distinction is nonprofit and for-profit, which, is pretty much what it sounds like. So nonprofit long-term care homes spend their revenue on programs and activities in the home, whereas for-profit long-term care homes, they're seeking to make a profit for the owners and the shareholders. And then another distinction is private or public long-term care homes. So long-term care homes can be operated either by a government, which is typically municipalities, or it can be run by a private entity like a corporation. And so the majority of just under 60% of long-term care homes in Ontario are privately run for-profit homes. And I should point out that both private and publicly owned long-term care homes receive provincial funding. And so there's different arguments for and against each of these different models. But, Maureen's experience with her mom in a privately run for-profit long-term care home, she felt that her mom's care was secondary to this particular long-term care home's goal of generating profit.
All right, let's talk about the four parties and how they are addressing long-term health care in the province. I want to start with the Progressive Conservatives. What is that party bringing forth?
So the Tories say that they're on track to build more than 30,000 net new long-term care beds across the province by 2028. However, they've been criticized for awarding licenses to private long-term care homes that long-term care home operators that operated homes with some of the highest rates of COVID-19 deaths during the pandemic. But if we look at other investments, including the 2022 budget, the PC say they will invest over $1 billion. They will invest $1 billion over 3 years to improve home care. And they've also introduced a temporary tax credit for seniors to make modifications to their homes so they can live in their homes longer. But out of the four major parties, the PCs are the only one who do not promise to end for-profit long-term care.
All right, in the last minute that we have, I do want to get through the three other parties. The other three seem to be taking a different approach. The NDP calling for an end for-profit long-term care homes. Stephen Del Duke and the Liberals are hoping to develop a home care first approach, while the Green Party is, quote, prioritizing care over profit. What are those three parties bringing to the table when we talk about long-term care homes?
Right. So each of these three parties have promised to end for-profit long-term care. That typically looks like, they'll stop giving operating licenses to for-profit long-term care homes. And each of these parties as well, they want to increase the number of beds. There's investments in home care. And, each of these parties as well, they want to make sure that residents living in long-term care will get an average of 4 hours of care per day. So, there's lots of investments these parties are looking to make.
Charnel, great pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for bringing these stories to light. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jan.
In this third and final full week of the campaign, the agenda assessed the party's promises on transportation, found out why Doug Ford's mandate letters from 2018 are headed to the Supreme Court of Canada, and spoke to NDP leader Andrea Horwath as she was recovering from COVID. The agenda's week in review begins talking to candidates and experts about what this election has had to say about housing affordability.
We too recognize the need for the 1.5 million homes over the next decade. At the same time, the priority is towards the affordable housing crisis and finding these solutions. Of that 182,000, 100,000 would be affordable housing units. 60,000 are specific permanent units that have wraparound mental health services, so that supportive infrastructure is in place. And 22,000 would be dedicated towards the Indigenous communities of our province, and it would be an urban-rural Indigenous-led strategy, so that we're looking at the whole picture there, but still recognizing the 1.5 million home target along with the other three parties.
So that extra bit that you just referred to, you think that distinguishes your housing plan from the other three major parties?
Well, it does, because this has been an ongoing crisis. Even in the last election when I ran, we saw that the affordable housing crisis wasn't getting the action and the attention it deserved. And we see solutions throughout our riding and across the province that sometimes don't need, like, obviously it needs funding. And this is about priorities. We know the government needs to get back into the business of affording the right measures and the right financing so that our nonprofits, our co-ops can get on with being part of the solutions. Our developers have the right incentives. And again, we come back to, why are we talking about the Conservatives building a multi-billion-dollar highway, sprawlway, if you will, when the housing issue is at a crisis level and we know where the priorities are? We've heard it from voters across this province.
I'm going to mark you down as being against Highway 413. Have I got that right?
You sure do. And
I
the
do.
Bradford bypass while we're at it.
And the Bradford bypass, too. Okay. Since you're all basically agreeing to match what the Conservatives have promised in their April 28th budget, let me, and Chi, why don't you start here? I guess the question at this point then becomes, you're all pledging to build a lot of new homes, and we don't even know if this is possible. What makes you think we can actually do 1.5 million homes over the next decade?
Yeah, it's an ambitious and a really important target, and I really want to thank the folks at More Neighbors and several other advocacy groups that I think have really helped us in the conversation to move us along. I think all the parties were encouraged by More Neighbors to set this ambitious target. And so for me, the mechanism that's really important, that's part of our plan, is the creation of the Ontario Home Building Corporation. The focus for that agency, this new public agency, like a Metrolinx, is to actually do the work of financing and building more housing. And that's going to be deeply affordable housing. We're targeting 138,000 units of deeply affordable housing, 22,000 Indigenous-led, 78,000 social housing, and 38,000 supportive housing, with additional operating funds to support the community agencies that do the work around the supportive housing piece. We know that that's so important right now. And so as we build that out, we want to emphasize that we want to see housing built along the transit corridors. We're investing billions, as we should do, in the transit infrastructure that we desperately need in this province, that we really, delayed for many years on. And so I'm very, very proud of both the transit investments and the housing investments. And we know that, that every dollar that we put into building these investments, making these choices, brings back $1.40 into the economy. Coming out of World War II, what did we do well in this country? We built cars and we built houses. And so coming out of the pandemic, our opportunity is to make smart public investments in a way that's really going to drive our opportunities to create the housing and the transit that we need. And over the last couple of years, Ford in the last election promised that he would bring that affordability to us. And we've seen the housing prices jump by $500,000 over this past 4 years. What we want to commit to is doubling the pace of construction than it currently is at the moment. And that's not something that the Ford government has invested in their budget. They have not put those measures in. Our budget and our plan makes the commitments right away for us to try and double the supply and that build in as the first go.
All right, Kristen, do we even have the people power to meet these very ambitious targets?
Well, we're certainly going to have to build that. The capacity of the construction industry has to be scaled up, as well as the ability to lift some land use planning controls, which is what is going to be so helpful with the NDP platform, is that we're committing to ending exclusionary zoning in too many neighborhoods across Ontario. There is a restriction of the type of housing that can be built, and we need to be able to build more duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, sixplexes, and so forth. We need to be able to incentivize the developers so that therefore they're not sitting on approvals. And oftentimes in the city of Toronto, by way of example, we approve about 28,000 units of housing every single year through the planning pipeline, and only half of those are ever pulled with respect to building permits. So the NDP will also introduce a tax that says if you don't use your planning approvals, you're going to lose it. And we know that there's a lot of money and costs and time that goes into getting those approvals. So we want those developers to actually start doing that. The other thing I think is critically important is to make sure that we have inclusionary back online. One thing that we have seen the Ford government do is weaken inclusionary zoning. The Liberal government delayed the inclusionary zoning request from municipalities. So it's not just about increasing the supply, which is absolutely critical, and we're able to do that.
I think part of the big issue that a lot of the plans really don't talk about specifically, right? Some of the Green Party and the New Democratic Party talk about this specifically, is just the speculation in the market, right? So a lot of the housing sales that we're seeing or home buying patterns are not from families or individuals trying to find a place to live. It's from investors, right? So when a quarter of your kind of housing is being bought by investors, that's creating a different drastic market for people to actually buy a place to live. And what's just happening is that a lot of people are kind of distancing themselves from the kind of inner core of these urban areas and moving further and further out into these smaller towns to just find an affordable place to live. So I think a lot of the housing issues that also are in conjunction with the wage issues, right? All the plans state how housing costs are rising faster than wages. So there's no holistic view on how we're going to even increase wages or incomes to even afford a housing stock that we're talking about. So you get this kind of constant reshuffling around as people are just trying to find affordable places to live across the province, which is putting pressure on some of the smaller cities that we were just talking about.
Well, there's that word again, affordable. I've heard this 1,000 times in the campaign. Affordable housing, deeply affordable housing. Karen, I want to understand from you what, in your view, constitutes, in this day and age, affordable housing.
So in housing policy, we have a definition of what is affordability. We say a household should spend about 30% of its income in order for it to be in affordable housing. Now, the issue is that we have a crisis of income inequality. We have a growing of the 1% and then immiseration of the middle class and moderate income folks and lower income folks. So the affordability crisis extends now through 80% of the population. So that narrative, however, has not caught hold with the public. So the public doesn't understand fully that the affordable housing crisis is now about them. It's about their children. It's about their grandchildren.
Well, tell me this then. If traditionally we've always considered affordable housing to be housing on which you don't have to spend more than 30% of your income, given the reality on the ground today, do we need to reevaluate what that means? Maybe we should just be expecting to pay half of our income on housing these days because that's where it's at. What do you think?
I don't think the math works out, Steve. If you look at household budgets and you look at rising food costs, rising transportation costs, there's just no room to pay more for housing.
Tim, do you agree with that?
No, this debate's a bit like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, right? In terms of one thing I've learned in all the time in public life, Steve, that people are people. They'll make choices. Some will spend more than that. Some will spend less. The number I focus on is the rate of home ownership in our province. And a great story about Canada has been that from Confederation through the wars, the 1970s, you had a better shot at owning a home than your parents or grandparents. And that built our middle class. It's the strength of our social fabric until the last 6 years. Well, 2016, it headed downhill. We put a focus on getting that number back up, getting back up to about 70% of adults in Ontario should be homeowners. And that benefits renters as well, because when you move into a home that you own, frees up more quality rental, and it goes all through the spectrum through social housing as well. That's my target.
Okay, Paul, would you agree with that approach?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that front. So I think Tim's really bang on in observing that home ownership has been changing, and we do need to see that there's an age polarization here. So home ownership continues to rise for an older demographic in Ontario, but by comparison with when baby boomers started out in Ontario's young adults, home ownership is now down 20% for those under age 45. And that's a really big challenge because, as Tim showed, as homeownership declines for younger demographic, there's more competition for rentals that drives rent up, and then it's harder to save for homeownership into the future. And then I think Karen was making a really important point about the degree to which there's like a hollowing out of our middle class. But I would want to put one refinement on what Karen said, because there is a hollowing out in two ways. One quite positive. For an older demographic, the amount of wealth people have been able to acquire from having slept in their home, cooked in their home, raised their kids in their home over the last decades, pushing many older Ontarians into something above the middle class. You only need $1 million to really be the global 1%. Ontario's housing system is producing a lot of global one percenters, and it's their kids and grandchildren who are then being pushed out of the middle class because they are struggling to be able to find secure housing with enough bedrooms, whether as a renter in a co-op and maybe homeownership. I mean, homeownership is being pushed out of reach for young people who earn six figures as lawyers, let alone the middle class in terms of the earnings.
Do you think transportation has gotten short shrift in the campaign?
Not at all. I think there's been a lot of conversation around transportation with the various party platforms related to whether it's transit, roads, operating funds for transit, capital, some different ideas around getting around Northern Ontario, electrification. So there is a lot of conversation. And I think part of that is that stimulus, check mark to sort of say we're going to get infrastructure happening in order to ensure economic stimulus is happening in the province.
Well, you mentioned the North, so let's go there. Your Worship, how much has transportation been a factor in what you're hearing about the provincial election campaign?
It is absolutely a huge factor in Northern Ontario. Unfortunately, the platforms don't really align with what the priorities are for Northerners. We're seeing that, yes, the Ontario Northland is on some platforms to reinstate that service. But unfortunately, we're not seeing any movement towards making highways 11 and 17 safer for both commercial truck drivers and residents as well.
Let me ask you a follow-up about the Northland or the train. Yeah, a bunch of them are promising it. Do you believe they're actually going to do it?
It's a plan. I think that their heart is in it. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, it is my opinion that it's not going to go forward.
Because?
I think it's the ridership is one issue. The Northlander is kind of like a milk train. It is slow. It will take in between Timmins and the GTA approximately 12 hours overnight to travel to Union Station. That will certainly make ridership lower. I think that as well, we're in a state where people these days we're spoiled. We're used to using our vehicles. We're used to getting there faster and having the flexibility to travel from one place to the other. So unless the price of gas goes up substantially, I think that we'll still want to take our own vehicles to travel to Southern Ontario.
I think a furry beast just made a cameo in the background of your shot, Your Worship. I think I saw that. Anyway, please welcome him or her to the broadcast at your convenience. Jeff, let's get you in here. How, in your view, has the pandemic changed the way that you look at transportation in the province? You've been on this program many times in the past talking about it, but I presume things are different post-pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. As we come out of the pandemic, we have been spending a lot of time thinking about how we get around. And certainly public transit during the pandemic has suffered. People are just, uncomfortable being in what we might call mass transportation. It just wasn't a really viable option during the public health emergency. But what's happened, Steve, is that we've seen really major growth in active transportation. So we've seen much more walking, much more cycling. This is just a way both to get out of the house during the lockdowns and so on. And people who have never experienced that as a way to commute or commuting from home are now seeing these modes as a much more viable alternative. So I think as we come out of the pandemic, it's going to require a major rethink. I hope we don't default back to the auto dominance that we've seen for decades now. I hope that active transportation will continue to be a viable opportunity for people who want to travel. And I hope that public transit, returns to its pre-pandemic levels and continues to grow.
Just for those who are coming to this story new, what's a mandate letter?
A mandate letter is directions that a premier or a prime minister gives to each member of his or her cabinet as to their priorities in the coming year.
Now, recently, and by that I mean Kathleen Wynne in the previous Ontario government and Justin Trudeau in the current federal government, have released their mandate letters, their marching orders to the cabinet ministers. Doug Ford has chosen not to. Do you know why?
I don't. It's puzzling. One would think, as Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau felt, that you want the public to know what the government's priorities are in each of its for each of its ministers, and they proudly trumpet them. So all of us were a bit taken aback in 2018, after Doug Ford was elected, when the CBC's request for access to the mandate letters was refused by Cabinet Office as a violation of Cabinet confidentiality.
Now, having said that, there is no law or legal obligation that requires them to do that, right?
No, but all governments, and Doug Ford is quoted repeatedly as saying that he's a strong believer in transparency. As a value in Canada, we want our governments to be transparent so the public can be informed and can exercise its proper democratic oversight of what governments do. So there's every reason to release them, although there's no obligation to do so.
I know you're not a lawyer, but is it reasonable to argue, as they are, that mandate letters are all part of cabinet confidentiality? We don't release what ministers say about various topics at the cabinet table, and this is merely an extension of that.
That is the argument the Ontario government is making, and it's an argument that I think is wrong, but it's also an argument that the Information Privacy Commissioner of Ontario felt was wrong. It was an argument that the Divisional Court that reviewed the Information Privacy Commissioner's decision felt was wrong, and it's the decision that the Ontario Court of Appeal felt was wrong.
I know you don't know the reasons why they're refusing to make these letters public, but what potentially concerns you about why they might not be making these public?
My concern is less what might be hidden in the particular documents and more, I think that we have a government that really doesn't believe in transparency and is using the exception for cabinet confidentiality to include a lot of things that are not properly part of cabinet confidentiality. I mean, if I could just explain, it is important for members of cabinet to be able to freewheel, to discuss ideas, to try out, proposals, to respond in different ways, and not to be held publicly accountable for what they may say in these brainstorming sessions. So that there's a proper protection for cabinet confidentiality for that process, but not for the outcomes of it.
Those multimillionaires in Ontario are not stones. In fact, they have a lot of wealth, and many of them have seen a significant growth in their wealth over the last couple of years. And so we absolutely are going to ask them to pay a little bit more. And the same with those corporations that made windfall profits during the pandemic and should be contributing to making sure that we fix the things that are broken. There's just no doubt that can be done. So yeah, if you're earning over $220,000, we're going to ding you for a little bit of more taxes. If you're earning over $300,000, even a little bit more. These multi-millionaires that we have in Ontario can afford to pay a little more so that everyday people can afford everyday life in our province. I was on TikTok the other day because, of course, I'm sitting home with the virus, and I was just scrolling through. I don't do that very often. My sister does it all the time. I can never understand why she's sending me TikTok clips, but I started doing that, and I landed on this one woman who was maybe in her late 20s, maybe possibly early 30s, and she was sobbing to her camera and basically saying, I can't make it anymore in Ontario. I can't pay my bills. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford to live here. And she was crying. And she said, certainly I'm not, am I alone? Am I the only one? Am I alone? And then it made me scroll even more. And the number of young people that were on TikTok describing how hopeless they are about how unaffordable life is in this province, it's devastating. And so we have an obligation to learn those lessons that were taught by COVID. And to take seriously the fact that we have to bring hope to the next generation.
Okay, here's where I circle back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago, where we talk about if you don't like the current government, who's the logical alternative? And I guess the New Democrats and the Liberals both have a tougher road in a way, because they both want to be the champions of the progressive vote. So they got to deal with that first, and then once they've got that figured out, they can go take on Doug Ford. And I wonder if that makes it just that much more difficult for you to get to where you want to be at the end of the day, because the first thing you got to do is you got to convince people you're better than the Liberals, and then you got to convince people you're better than the Tories. Is that harder to do?
I don't see it that way at all, Steve. In fact, I think job number one is to make sure that we defeat Doug Ford in this election. More than 6 out of 10 people who are polled do not want to see Doug Ford become the premier again. So that's job number one. And that's the job that I'm doing. But I'm also showing folks that we don't have to go back to the same old again, and once again be disappointed by the Liberals. We saw what happened last time, and that's why Stephen Del Duca didn't even win his seat, and why they only got 7 seats and not even party status last time, because they sold off Hydro One, because the hospitals were squeezed to the point where they brought us hallway medicine, the gas plant scandal. It goes on and on. The last thing people want is to end up in the same situation that they got themselves out of in 2018. And what I'm saying to Ontarians is, you do have hope that you can have a government and a premier that works for you each and every day, that fixes the things that matter the most, and most importantly, is prepared to defeat Doug Ford and provide a province and a future where people can have some hope that the essentials are being taken care of and people can afford to build a good life here.
And that is just some of what we covered this week. You can find more, including the full conversations, on our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda. And for all our election coverage, including our On Poly podcast, which drops every weekday during the writ period, please check out this website, tvo.org/Ontario Election 2022. And that's all for this Friday, May 27th, 2022. On Monday, we'll find out what parents and teachers are saying about this election and why, even after all the disruption from COVID-19, education still doesn't seem to be the ballot box question in this campaign. Hope you'll be with us. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you back here again on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman.